It's Wednesday, July 2nd, and today we're focusing on a major shift in U.S. policy towards Syria. After years of strict sanctions and diplomatic isolation, the White House has announced it's lifting most of the economic restrictions that have shaped Syria's recent history. To put this in context, our sanctions have been have been a defining feature of Syria's economy and international standing since the early days of the civil war. They were designed to pressure the Assad regime and limit resources for military operations and human rights abuses. But late last year, the Assad government fell, and a new interim administration led by Ahmed al-Shara has been trying to stabilize the country and rebuild. With this change, the U.S. is signaling support for Syria's new leadership and opening the door for reconstruction and renewed international engagement. Most sanctions are being dropped, though some remain in place for individuals and groups tied to past abuses or terrorism. So, Jess, I'd like to start with you. What does this mean for Syria and for the people of Syria and regional politics?
Obviously, this is a really big moment. For the first time in a long time, they don't have an Assad ruling them. President Trump has just given a lifeline not only to the people, 90% who live under the poverty line. You've got tens of millions living in temporary shelters. I mean, just like economic devastation, not only a lifeline to the people, but to the government, without trying to better the conditions of civilians. I mean, there's no shot for al-Shara, right? That's change that needs to happen. Not only that, there's geopolitical ramifications trying to pull Syria a bit away from the Iran, Russia kind of influence that they've historically had. Another thing I find really interesting is the role of Saudi when it comes to the drop of sanctions. Obviously, President Trump met the new leader of Syria in Saudi. There's been discussion of normalization of relations with Syria and Israel potentially. And I think there's a growing focus of the administration using Saudi in the region, both their influence and also possibly their petrodollars to revitalize the area, trying to diminish maybe, the economic lifeline of the United States. And I wonder in the long term if that's kind of the move here, right? Like President Trump loves his deals, whether we can start to see Saudi kind of being a broker in many of these and potentially displacing us a little, and the need to have the U.S. engaged in every transaction that's happening in the region.
So, Amy, I'd like to ask you about this. Obviously, Ahmed al-Shara himself has certainly been on the U.S. kind of watch list for some time prior to all of this. Is this a wise idea coming out of Washington, or are there some concerns that people should be aware of?
So Jess said, Trump met him in Saudi, which is true. We don't know this man. We know that he's a former member of al-Qaeda. He says that he has renounced that. He's only been the leader for 6 months. And I think basing our foreign policy decisions on Trump's strongman approach of this is a young, attractive guy is, not a wise decision. Now, could some good come out of this? And, you look at the Syrian people who have been, just decimated for decades. Yes, but we are not getting anything in return for lifting these sanctions. And that is, in Jess's words, like, great, Trump made a deal, but it's an act of desperation to make a deal where we are potentially putting U.S. lives in the region at risk and propping up another regime potentially that we don't know. And we have learned in that region that is never in U.S. best interest long term.
Lester, you look like you have something to say.
Oh, that's good, because that's what we're supposed to do here, right? Is say stuff.
Hide his mic.
Yeah. No, don't. I do disagree with Amy on this. I think it's a good idea to reach out to al-Shara and give Syria an opportunity to move in a constructive direction for several reasons. One, Trump is a transactional, in the moment, deal making guy. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Middle East. The pushing Iran into a corner, the rise of Turkey and Saudi Arabia, and new relationships kind of forming across the region. We should be in that game. We should be present and making moves here that can advantage us on a number of different issues, from the energy sector to security to other things. And the things that have been going, the events in the region have been moving in a really positive direction for us. This keeps the ball in the air. I take Amy's point that there's, we haven't gotten a lot for it yet, but the possibility is there. It is, I think it's real. And this new government deserves an opportunity to kind of fashion itself in a way where we can be constructive. It's never going to be perfect. In the Middle East, there's always like 8 different countervailing currents that are going to disappoint you at some point, and there are unintended consequences of every move. All that is true, and we should be modest in our expectations. But I think staying in the game, engaging, and looking for opportunities to develop things in a positive way can only be good right now. If in the next 6 to 12 months we see developments that aren't positive, we can move back to a more constrained approach. But right now, I think let's take advantage of the opening.
And do you anticipate that there will be normalization of relations with Israel with time?
Well, I mean, who knows? Who knows? A lot. I don't know. Maybe they'll announce something on Monday when Bibi Netanyahu shows up in the White House. I mean, there could be Abraham Accords with a dozen different countries. Who knows? Or not? No, but unclear to me. But it certainly seems like there's a lot of rumors to that effect. Things could happen. There's all kinds of things on the table, including this. There's now talk of a ceasefire in Gaza for a couple of months. Could that lead to a more permanent solution to that very, very difficult question? Let us all hope so.
Amy?
Just one response to Les, who said, this new Syrian government, let's keep in mind this is a non-elected, non-democratic government. He assumed power. And so what does that mean long term? And per Secretary Rubio's op-ed yesterday on Substack on how the U.S. will treat aid and foreign policy, right? Apparently the U.S. is not in support of democracy around the world anymore. So we are, putting our trust in yet another strongman in a web of strongmen in the Middle East who, over the past couple decades, have played us like fiddles.
To kind of Les's point, so we just like yesterday also at the same time that the sanctions were lifted on Syria, they came back down on Cuba, and so this kind of double-edged sort of like who gets the deal by doing nothing or do like what we're asking of different parties. We saw the same thing with negotiations between Putin and Zelensky, right? Like who President Trump kind of favors. I mean, this is not particularly surprising who they favor, how different that reduces the burden on some to get what they want.
Amy, the only look, I'm all for democracy. Truly, at the end of the day, that's the thing.
Wasn't reassuring. I wasn't pointing at you.
Spiritually, I am with you. But we live here in this profane world, and if we're waiting for the perfect partner in the Middle East, we will have no one. So we got to get in there and mix it up and be engaged. At the end of the day, we're gonna get mud on us for sure. That's fine. We're big kids. We can handle it. But I think better to be involved than not.
Well, but that brings up another point, right? As this administration had promised that we'd finally get to the pivot to the Indo-Pacific. And yet here we are, once again, all roads lead to the Middle East. And so getting mud on us, for the next couple of years in the Middle East detracts from our greatest near-peer adversary.
We're never going to pivot away from the Middle East. I have news for everyone.
I agree with that 100%. Yeah, finally.
It's not going to happen.
Well, obviously this is risk-taking yet again. The Trump administration, I think the biggest theme that I see across the board is taking risks. And I think, a lot of times this is the risk-taking can yield some very positive results. And, I think he surprised everyone during his first term with the Abraham Accords. So who knows? Maybe the glass half full is will come to fruition here.
We might still get our Riviera. It might not be Gaza, but it might be in Damascus.
Haven't quite forgotten about that one. The Golden Riviera. Yes, that'll be a sight to see. So on that note, That's a wrap. Thanks, as always, to Taylor Lane, Carolee Crowley, to Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for helping produce today's episode. Join us on Monday, July 7th, because we have a July 4th holiday for another episode of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast to get you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We're also on YouTube, so please go check us out. And if you like what you've seen or heard, rate, review, and subscribe.